When I published my video on Jordan Peterson, I was expecting a far larger kickback from his fans than received, as while several made their presence known, there weren't all that many of them. It turns out that the first person to make a video upset at what I had said was none other than a transphobic pseudo-feminist by the username MenR TheProblem. Said user was angry at me linking her particular flavour of bigotry to right-wing powerhouses such as Breitbart, the Daily Mail, and British nationalists. Nowhere in said video is there an actual argument, however, merely a string of pure assertions which only exist as a consequence of cutting my video off before I reach the evidence behind my point. MenR TheProblem seems to follow that patented Sargon of Akkad school of argument where they play half a sentence and follow it with a barely coherent rant ended with a completely interchangeable insult for added effect.
The accent is a little bit creepy and a little bit crazy, but fucktard. You're an idiot, Essence of Thought. Maybe he's twins. Maybe he thinks he's a woman. I don't know. Let's listen to what other stupid things he has to say. What a fucking douche you are, Essence of Thought. You are a fucking idiot. Listen, fucktard. What fucking planet are you living on again? You are irrational and illogical. Period. Fucktard. Fuckhead. That's not rational. Fucktard. To show me that you're a dope, okay? You're a fucking male supremacist idiot. Fucktard. Only example this fuckwit could come up with. It's the most obnoxious stupidity ever. Essence of Thought, you are a royal idiot. And your accent doesn't make you sound smart. It doesn't. When people actually listen to your words like I just did, right, and pick them apart, you're actually fucking idiotic. Douche.
I don't understand why pseudo-feminists seem unable or unwilling to drop the ableism. It seems that much like their frequent transphobia, racism and class issues, they also have a disdain for those with disability. Yet perhaps what really got to me the most was this.
Something like domestic violence shelters have meant the difference between life and death for women. You don't care about women. You don't care about women's rights. You don't care about women's lives because you're a male supremacist asshole. You're the furthest thing from a feminist that I can even imagine. You're actually closer to Jordan Peterson with this stupid fucking rhetoric.
Because one often likes to ask, how ethically twisted must a person become to pretend like they give a shit about victims of domestic violence whilst they abuse a victim of domestic violence? The domestic violence refuge is my lived experience, not yours, and not a single one of the people I have stayed in touch with from said refuge have taken issue with my existence as a trans person. So as a refuge survivor, allow me to be the one to tell you to go fuck yourself, you manipulative tosser. Now some people may be asking why I've opened my video in this way, starting with the insults rather than the arguments, and that's for a simple fact that, as already mentioned, there are no arguments. Just vitriol and a whole lot of assertion salad, and I want you the viewers to understand my fury in this response. I have talked about rage as having a part in fighting injustice, and this is part of that. I can't separate this video from the fact that its entirety is designed to devalue me as a human being, so I'm not even going to try. But moving on to the most frequently asserted point of their response.
But he's calling radical feminists extremists because we want our privacy and safety rights respected. Somehow, enshrining sex-based protections into law and wanting to keep them is an extremist position to this fucktard. You're an idiot, Essence of Thought. I don't know where you came up with this, but let's listen because I'm sure it'll be comedic. There you go. Transphobic pseudo-feminist. I mean, this is outrageous, right? It's laughable. The fact that he thinks women organizing to keep their sex-based protections is somehow an extremist group? Oh, man. Maybe he's trans. Maybe he thinks he's a woman. I don't know. Let's listen to what other stupid things he has to say. So yeah, basically, women's sex-based protections are transphobic and authoritarian. What fucking planet are you living on again? You are irrational and illogical. Period. Wait, Radical feminists are trying to legislate trans people out of existence. Are you even listening to the words you're actually speaking? Has nothing to do with denying anybody's existence. Do biological females exist in a world full of male violence against them or not? Quite clearly, statistically, we do. Hence, why we have the sex-based protections and women-only spaces from those sex-based protections to begin with. Fuck tard. It's not a human right to violate women's safe spaces. They're there for a fucking reason, based on rationality and reality. Fuckhead. Oh, yes, the Labor Party, where women-only shortlists that were created by women who found it incredibly difficult to get into these powerful positions created space for other women and girls to move into. See, you're not a feminist at all, Essence of Thought. You're a male supremacist, because the fact that you don't understand why women and girls would have these certain sex-based protections to begin with just goes to show me that you're a dope, okay? You're a fucking male supremacist idiot. So there's these few spaces for women, just a few little spaces for women in the Labor Party. And you've got a fucking teenage boy claiming to be a woman and wanting to get on a woman-only shortlist to be a women's officer. What the fuck does a teenage boy have to say about women's lives and realities? Nothing. Period. Nothing. Fucktard. So there you go. The only example this fuckwit could come up with for all of these horrific extremist left-wingers was actual feminists. Feminists who have organized for their sex-based protections for decades and are not going to give them up without a fucking fight. Because guess what? Those sex-based protections, something like domestic violence shelters, have meant the difference between life and death for women. You don't care about women. You don't care about women's rights. You don't care about women's lives because you're a male supremacist asshole. You're the furthest thing from a feminist that I can even imagine.
That, my friends, is how you say the exact same thing 6 times in a single video. Okay, so the assertion is simple. Supporters of equality are seeking to put an end to gender-based protections. Why and how? Well, because trans women are being included in said protection. I hope the failure of this statement is apparent immediately. How could the broadening of protections for women to include women previously excluded be classed as the destruction or removal of said protections? The reality is that outside of the dishonesty MenR TheProblem is relying on, it can't. If anything, these amendments to include trans women only reinforces the idea that said policies are still as relevant today as they were when they were created. Yet as good as said bills were, they were created in more ignorant times. Our understanding of gender and society as a whole has grown and matured, so it's completely reasonable to expect amendments to said policies to match the changing times, and most reasonable people understand that. We the people, as noted in the Constitution of the United States of America, did not refer to all people, but mostly white landowning men. Over time, this got broadened through amendments, and that was a great thing. It's a shame that the American right seems dead set on reversing that. Trans women do not want to invade women's spaces. They simply want the same access other women have already enjoyed. This is like saying a British person wants to invade the UK or that an American wants to invade the United States. I want to say that you may as well be arguing that black women, disabled women or working class women shouldn't be allowed to quote invade women's spaces, but I'm worried I'll just give you ideas. Trans women are women. Women's spaces are therefore spaces trans women have the right to access as with any other woman, and your attempts to isolate them as the only women not permitted is just a form of unlawful segregation, breaching their civil rights. The idea of trans women as some invader is part of the transphobic pseudo-feminist mythos, leading us nicely into your second point.
Oh, there you go. So radical feminists are left-wing authoritarians because we enshrine things like Title IX into the law and other sex-based protections. Now, not based on myth, not based on, say, for example, these right-leaning extremists with their mythology about how black people are stupid and we need a white-only school and all this. No, no. Radical feminists base their fucking sex-based protections that they acquired legally through various human rights organizations, etc., including humongous human rights organizations like the UN. And somehow these sex-based rights that radical feminists and other feminists got based on statistical fact of sex-based violence against women is somehow an extremist position. What a fucking douche you are, Essence of Thought. You are a fucking idiot.
Actually, you're just a liar. The transphobic pseudo-feminists do indeed have a bigoted mythology upon which they found their views. You yourself have displayed that repeatedly throughout your video. The mythology is that trans women are cis men and that trans women pose an active threat to cis women. That's your mythology. That mythology exists in a world where unisex bathrooms and trans-inclusive services exist, and said world hasn't devolved into the chaos being forwarded by you. This is no different than the claim that homosexual people shouldn't be allowed to teach children because fears of molestation, or that black people shouldn't be allowed in, quote, white neighborhoods because fears that they'll rob a house or rape a white woman. Your mythology not only exists, but is the exact same mythology as the aforementioned examples. There is no difference in how abhorrent your views are. Also, please stop pretending that transphobic pseudo-feminism is responsible for the policies achieved by the groups yours is a parasite of. But I will note I find it funny how you would claim legitimacy to your bigotry on the basis that actual feminism has received support from the United Nations, when the United Nations has come out in support of transgender rights, including the inclusion of trans women in women-specific policy. Isn't it funny how you ignore that fact whilst making your argument? Now yes, a trans woman could sexually assault a cis woman, just like a lesbian can do. But do we exclude lesbians from women's spaces? No, because they are women, and whilst there will always be terrible people who do terrible things no matter what, that's no justification to segregate, to exclude one group of women from a women's space. I was a child raised in a domestic violence refuge. I was also a child raped in a domestic violence refuge, and not by a cis man or a trans woman, but a cis woman. Tragedies like that happen, but here's a fact you're ignoring. Not every black person has to be a saint to retain their civil rights. The same for homosexual people, the same for cis people, the same for trans people, the same for everyone. Trans women are women, and their sexual assaults tally alongside those, like I suffered, carried out by cis women. Transphobic pseudo-feminists are a greater threat to trans people than trans people are, period. Since said transphobic pseudo-feminists will call for the collective violence against trans people for having the audacity to seek their civil rights, as has been running in the background of the segment of my video you have been playing this entire time. This will happen in a public place with clear context, and it will be cheered by people such as yourself, and those who call for said violence will be defended without question. Transphobic pseudo-feminism is inherently violent, not only in calling for direct violence as Linda Bellos did, but in stripping trans people of their civil rights. Stripping people of their rights is an act of violence.
Yeah, you know how they fought back? By deplatforming these women, by physically harming these women. The two examples in the UK, where men beat up two different women because they disagreed, and no platforming them so that they can't speak at all. Yeah, that's patriarchy, dude. That's male supremacy. When you deny women a platform to argue for their sex-based protections and their rights, You basically live in a male supremacy. So trans activists are enacting male supremacy. So you wouldn't say that about any other group, right? You would only say it about women. See, for example, if a white guy says he's black and he wants into a black liberation movement, would you think that's nuts? Yeah, I would too. Because there's a reason why certain groups have lobbied for certain rights and protections, and women and girls have theirs. And it just so happens that trans activists think that the only way they're going to get anywhere is by breaking down women's and girls' safety rights, which doesn't have to be the case. You just need a little bit of intelligence to look at this issue and solve it. What you need is women and girls to have their safe space and their protected space, and the trannies can have their fucking safe space. So men who delude themselves into thinking that they're women, right, can go have their own fucking bathroom. But you don't take from one oppressed group, right, in order to give to the other one. That's not rational. Fucktard.
Ah yes, because you are the self-appointed arbiter deciding what is and what isn't rational. Fact is, there is a simple solution. Stop discriminating against women. When you say there's a policy in place to protect women and girls, that includes trans women and trans girls, just like black women and black girls, and disabled women and disabled girls, and working class women and working class girls. You may hate that fact, but the title women doesn't refer solely to women like you. Putting an end to your active bigotry is the easiest solution, and thankfully the left is realizing that and is pulling back the veil of pseudo-feminism that not only harms trans women, but also cis women. Like the call to violence put out by Linda Bellos to punch trans women if they have the opportunity, very specifically justifying said violence not on any immediate action of the trans person, but solely on the basis of them seeking to gain their civil rights through political venues, what Linda Bellos calls shitting on all women. This then gives cis men on the right, already looking for an excuse to punch any woman, the green light to do so. Now all they have to do is claim that they believed said cis woman to be a trans woman, and they can fall back on Linda Bellos and her call to violence to justify their actions. Do note that the segment I am referencing has a link to the full talk, so you can see I have not taken anything out of context, and if you desire to claim otherwise, then I expect you to prove that fact and not merely assert it, as so many have. Fact is, what I talk about has already happened. Cis women have been harassed, have been assaulted by cis men because said cis men thought said cis women were trans women. Hell, even politicians have gotten on the action, threatening to expose their genitals to a cis woman, thinking that they were a trans woman. This is already happening, and this is what people like yourself are putting cis women at risk of. Now you mentioned 2 examples yet do not back up said claims, so I know there was a singular incident in Hyde Park where a pseudo-feminist jumped into a crowd of feminists and was pushed back and had her camera destroyed in the ensuing scuffle. Said transphobic pseudo-feminist also choked one of the people they pushed into and was subsequently pushed off them and onto the ground where they sustained injury. Beyond this I don't know what you could be referring to, but since we have calls of action to violence by key speakers on your behalf for no other reason than trans people wanting their civil rights, as for the cries at deplatforming which come scarily close to the MRA rhetoric they've been using for years, I hope from the Linda Bellos example you the viewers can understand why this happens. Now I'd like to note another issue I take with the video as a whole. In it, MenR TheProblem keeps asking me to evidence my points, calling me various ableist slurs as they do so. The problem is that the 1 minute 10 seconds they show of my video in their 15-minute response is the introduction to said point. So they start my video at 15:46 and end it at 16:53. Fact is, the segment ends at 19:05, but I start giving specific examples of what I'm talking about as far back as 17:01, a mere 8 seconds after MenR TheProblem cuts off my video. Now why do you think that is? Here is that segment. But generally, people on the left are starting to say no to transphobic bigotry, something which has resulted in some interesting implications. Namely, these radical left-wing groups have flocked to right-wing sources, such as the Daily Mail, as a platform from which to launch their attacks. On top of this, Women's Place UK, a transphobic hate group leeching off an actual charity, recently welcomed nationalist Paul Morgan, even though Paul Morgan publicly believes feminism is responsible for the destruction of Europe. Key figures such as the self-titled Dr. Radfem, aka Venice Allen, have cozied up to Conservative MPs such as Davy Davies due to their stance on trans people. Venice Allen was expelled from the Labour Party after she, a woman in her mid-40s, set about first harassing and then stalking a teenage MP. What's interesting is the way in which Allen promotes Davies, thanking him for, quote, standing up for lesbians, end quote. The irony of which is shown when one realises that Davies has historically voted against marriage equality at every vote on the matter he attended. And whilst I'm talking about TERFs in the UK, we must note that the emergence of the current climate came about following US bathroom bills and the online discourse. This happens in the US as well, which is why nationalist blogs like Breitbart have taken a key interest. What, if not an absence of power forced upon said radical left groups, could in fact force said radical leftists to make bedfellows not simply with the right, but segments of the right which have historically sought to deny them their own rights? Now, I'm not under the illusion that this is a perfect system. Certain more central groups don't seem to want to do much of anything, but there is some visible accountability. Can you show me groups forwarding Stalinism or Maoism in the UK and the US to the same degree as I can show you members of the KKK and Nazis in the same places? No? So moving on, now that we have discussed the left, it is time for us to discuss Peterson's claims that the right has succeeded in boxing in Nazis. Now, I understand that one sometimes has to take liberties during the editing process, but surely if one is looking to debate, they should debate the strongest a person has to offer. Yet MenR TheProblem decided to focus entirely on the minute segment introducing the topic, ignoring the evidence shown in the background and completely removing the evidence examples that validated what I said. So it's all just been one straw man after another, changing my arguments and cutting out parts that demolish your rage entirely. Throughout their video, I have been labelled many things by MenR TheProblem, and whilst I could return in kind, I feel the expose conducted here to be far more cutting than 1,000 insults I'd be entirely justified in retaliating with. Also, I can tag team. Please welcome the content manager for the channel who reviews and edits my content, coming from the post-colonial perspective on feminism, Udita Chakrabarti.
First of all, congratulations in dragging the feminist label through the mud like a deflated football, and then resorting to using women living in domestic violence refuge as a shield against a person who has actually been living in one. Third, congrats on being able to limit your vocabulary to ableist slurs and replacing your arguments with attacks on people's accents. And lastly, proceeding on to lying by omission by actually editing out the full argument that you are supposedly responding to. That, my friends, is how you get a lying piece of shit who calls herself a feminist. People don't choose where on the gender spectrum they're going to be. But people can choose to be and not to be an arsehole, and you have just chosen to be the latter. You claim people like you have been fighting for our rights and our protection. Well, piss off. Take a few steps back and then piss off some more. People like you are exactly why sexual assaulters get away with shit. You are the reason hate crimes against the transgender community still happens. You talk about protection, huh? Guess what, you sorting fuckwaffle? I was sexually assaulted by both men and women. Yes, women too. To a lesser extent, but it was there. And it was that bit that took me ages to talk about, because of people like you who bring down sexual assaulters' identity to their genitalia only. In fact, the only time I was ever attacked in the bathroom was by lesbians who wanted to rip my top off. What have you done to protect me? Jack shit. You are part of the problem. People like you twist reality. I would probably feel safer sharing my space with a random trans woman than sharing it with the likes of you. You want to talk about domestic violence refuges? Well, I come from a place where I don't even have the option to go to one. I mean, experiences of living in domestic violence refuges here are so punishing for victims that honestly many of us don't see the difference between that and putting up with their abusers just a while longer. I've been through that. So fuck you pretending to care about people living in domestic violence shelters while responding to people who have actually lived in one or who really cannot go to one. And all of this while also insulting people with disabilities. Well done. I'm not even going to try and counter your video, and this is not just because somebody's responded before me, but it's also because I have had to witness how pathetic it is to even dissect your so rational and logical video, which seems to have been written by a dung beetle instead of a living Homo sapien. And also completely blindside the fact that protection of the transgender community is an important agenda for the UN. FYI, I actually worked with intersectional feminist platforms in India who have advocated transgender rights and recognitions and collaborated with international platforms. So good luck trying to take the credit on that one. TERFs like you are the reason that so many feel uncomfortable using the feminist label. You have done nothing but disservice to the entire feminist movement, let alone marginalized groups. Your fight against patriarchy is selective, whereby you channel the same hatred against communities less privileged than you. So take your damned pretentiousness and show it where the sun don't shine. Thankfully, transphobic arseholes like you, carrying the disguise of feminism, are being tolerated less and less, and I hope to see a future where you and your hateful propaganda dissolves into nothingness, as it should. Sincerely, a queer cis woman living in a third world shithole.
Now, I'd just like to note here at the end that I will not be responding to any more of MenR TheProblem's videos. I began preparing my response immediately once I knew that they had created their video, but since then they have published 2 further videos which are pretty damn similar. They're just insults, no substance. Hell, the title of one is even a straw man, claiming that I stated radical feminists were Nazis, rather than the accurate they have sold themselves out to nationalist groups, including the Nazis, as evidenced in my original video and just before Edita's segment. So yeah, I think we've got all we can out of this conversation. I'm wiping my hands of MenR TheProblem. They're a terrible person with no arguments, just insults, 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 and I can do better. I just wanted to get this one video out to show why I'm not responding any further, but yeah, I've met my quota with MenR TheProblem, and that's it. Happily dealt with. Hi there. I just want to say a few things here at the end of the video before you go. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who's ever donated to the channel via Patreon, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, John Schoenrock, Alexander Williams, and Daniel Martinez. Your support has ensured this channel its ability to grow over the years, and for that we are truly thankful. I'd also like to ask that you comment down below and like this video, as well as subscribe and follow EssenceOfThought on Facebook and Twitter. Please also consider following Atheist Alliance International on Facebook, an organisation dedicated to helping atheists around the globe. Do note, any comments utilising language which insults others on the basis of perceived gender, sexuality, ethnicity or ability, both mental and physical, will be removed immediately and the commenter may be blocked on the moderator's discretion. Let's keep this space one which upholds the humanist values. Thank you for watching.